I've just had a delivery of several very, very large terracotta pots for some big repotting things that I need to do this week. And the delivery guy was like, my God, you must have a big balcony. And I was like, no, I've got 300 houseplants. And he didn't quite know what to do with himself. But hello everyone, I hope you are doing fabulously well today. This is I would say my favourite annual video that I make here on my channel, where I take you through my wish list plants for, I was going to say 2024 then, 2025, the next year. And yeah, I've just recently made a video a few weeks ago on my channel looking at my wish list from last year and reacting to everything I had on that and talking a little bit about the plants that I did manage to tick off, and I ticked off a lot. So I'm hoping, God, I don't know why I'm so overly excited about this. Whew, calm self. But yes, I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to tick lots off my list this year as well. But first, if you're new here, hi, my name's Claire and this is Yoli. I make videos all about houseplant care, sharing tips and tricks I've learned over the years to help keep your plants happy and healthy. And part of the reason that I love making these videos is also because I love hearing your wishlist plants. So please do comment yours down below. I love expanding my own wish list, and it's just really nice to know what other people are wanting this year as well. So yes, I hope you enjoy it. Let's get into it. So I've said it before, but I've got a massive notes tab on my phone that is basically just full of my wish list plants. And whenever I see a plant that I'm really intrigued about, I'll put it at the bottom of the list to like go away and do a Google on. I know this is really sad. And then if I enjoy what I see when I Google it, then I will put it on my wish list, which is the upper part of my notes tab. And I've probably got about 200 plants on there at the moment. So I have, for this video, whittled down the list the best I possibly can. And I've come up with 10 that I think are firstly quite achievable, and also are just ones that I really, really would love to add to my collection this year. Also, I've got my laptop here so that I can like look at them and I can take you through them. And Yoli is sat behind my laptop looking so elegant and so beautiful. We're going to ignore the fact that she's not in her bed. She's next to her bed. But she's such a pretty girl. Oh my God, I love that dog so much. But yeah, let me squidge over so that I can pop the pictures just there. I've said it before as well, I will use pictures from Instagram to use just here, but if you want to kind of take a better look at these plants, I would highly recommend looking them up online, just because obviously Instagram doesn't always have, like for example, if a plant is quite unusual or quite, I was going to say rare, like quite a new one to grow as a house plant, sometimes there aren't that many pictures on Instagram. But the first one, also no particular order, but the first one I've got on my list is one that I'm sure I have spoken about before, and it is the Philodendron patriciae. And you guys know how much I love the long, strappy plants. And this is like, typically for me, that box is ticked with Anthuriums. This is obviously a philodendron, but it does, for me, it does very much give me Anthurium vibes. I would say looking at this one in its mature form, it almost reminds me of the Pallidiflorum cross veitchii, which are two of my favourite Anthuriums. So yeah, I just feel like it would be one that I would really, really enjoy growing. From my research as well, I have discovered that apparently it seems to be a very hardy philodendron. Typically philodendrons, I was going to say typically they are very hardy plants as a genus. There are some within the genus that are a little bit more finicky, but just looking at this plant and looking at the robustness of its structure, I can imagine it's quite an easy one to grow. This could be famous last words. I might be awful with this plant, but it does look like one that I feel like I would go into feeling pretty confident with. I know you can't judge a book by its cover, but I feel like I could do it. So yeah, this is, however, one that does typically size up quite quickly, apparently, and I would really want to bring out the absolute best in this plant because, as I say, although the immature form is lovely, looking at it in its mature state, that is the plant that I want. That's what I'd want to be going for. That's what I'd want to be achieving. And really, I think I would need to find a way to optimize my space so that I didn't get pushed out by my plants, because I have added so many plants to my collection since I've lived in this flat. I've been in this flat for just over 2 years now, and when I look at it when I first moved in compared to now, I'm like, oh my goodness. Yeah, things have grown. So I don't know. We'll cross that bridge as the year goes on, but it's one that I'm very, very keen to grow. And then this next one's one that I'm pretty sure I have had on my wish list before, but it wasn't in my video that I made last year. So yeah, this one's just kind of dropped off my radar a little bit, or I think other plants have just overshadowed it, but it is one that I really want to get. And it is the Cercestis mirabilis, and I just think it's stunning. Like, the leaves of that plant, they look like something out of this world. It's like a weird kind of cool alien-y plant that gives me almost Alocasia meets caladium vibes. It's just really, really awesome. I think I've said it before, I'm getting crazy deja vu as I talk about this, but I don't know why. I feel like it might be one that's a little bit difficult to grow, and I like that. Again, it's just going straight off my gut. If any of you have this plant, let me know your experience with it, because yeah, it's one that I just adore. I love how it's almost like the veination kind of makes it look like it's got scales. Is scales the right word? Yeah, like it's almost like alligator skin. It's kind of light and it's dark and it's dramatic, but it just ticks so many boxes for me. I do know that, like going back to what I just said about caladiums for me are a genus of plant, should I say, that I was obsessed with for a while. I absolutely loved caladiums. And then when it got to the point where I was having to kind of chop them all back and overwinter a lot of them, and I wasn't able to keep them alive all year round because they are annuals, I don't know, I got a little bit bored of that, to be honest. And so now I think the only caladium I have in my collection is the Caladium lindenii, which is this one here. And that one I am having various issues with at the moment. And as I say, this may not be even remotely related to the caladium, but it is one that appears very similar to a caladium. Like, for example, if I didn't know the genus of this plant, I probably would guess caladium. So yeah, it's one I definitely need to do a little bit more digging on and find out a little bit more about. A lot of these plants I've put on my wish list because I look at them and visually I'm like, wow. But actually there's been a few over the years that I have either taken off my wish list or demoted slightly just because I'm like, actually, I don't think I could currently provide those kind of growing conditions. So yeah, it's one that I just want to know more about. So stay tuned. It's one that I hope to acquire this year, but we'll see. And then talking of plants that require very specific growing conditions, the next one is a plant that I have owned before, but not for probably about 3 years now, and it's the Labisia turtleback. There are actually a few types of Labisia that I could have put on this list. I think there's one called the Pumilula or something as well that's black and it's gorgeous. But the Labisia turtleback is undeniably a stunningly beautiful plant. But when I first got this plant, I knew very little about its growing conditions. And again, I should have done way more research, but I don't know. I just wasn't as clued up on plants 3 years ago as I am now. And I'm probably not now as I will be 3 years down the line. So I'm constantly learning, but the thing that I have learnt about this plant is that it requires pretty much terrarium levels of humidity in order to keep it happy. And I was sent this plant from, I believe, Green Space Side, so it was an Indonesian import. It arrived and like at first it looked absolutely fine. I remember opening that box and I'd never seen the plant before and I was just like, oh my God, it's beautiful. The markings on its leaves. I know it's called turtleback and you can totally see why, but there's also something almost kind of leopard printy about it. It's very unusual. And I believe I put it in my little grow cabinet for the first few weeks, and although it did okay, it then very slowly started to drop its leaves, and it's almost like when a ficus starts to drop its leaves, you know, like, I don't know, when, for me, with ficus as a genus, when I start to lose leaves on like a fiddle leaf fig or a rubber plant or a weeping fig or something like that, I'll go, oh God, what's going on? Because often when it starts to go really downhill, if you don't chop and propagate, it can almost be too late. That's my personal experience anyway. And I felt very much like this with the Labisia turtleback. I did everything I possibly could to save it, but I think it was just too late. So I think because I had such a bad experience with it back then, I know it was a few years ago, but I just haven't brought it back into my collection since. And one of my main things that I want to do this year is create some really lovely, either like bioactive cabinet setups or terrarium setups, and just play about with plants that otherwise I probably wouldn't get the chance to grow in my collection because they just don't do well in normal room humidity. Also, bearing in mind, I have lots of tropical plants and I do run humidifiers. This is one for me that I just couldn't grow outside of a terrarium environment. So yeah, if you guys have any recommendations, in fact, for other really cool terrarium plants, please let me know down in the comments, because I've got a few ideas of projects that I'd like to work on this year to really kind of up my terrarium plant game, and there are so many beautiful ones. But yeah, let me know some of your favourites. And yeah, as I say, the other Labisia, I believe it's a Pamilla or something along those lines. I'll put a picture on the screen so that you can see it, but I think it was Johnny, the bearded plantaholic, has a gorgeous terrarium set up in his dining room, and he has a Labisia Pamilla or something like that in there, and I saw it and I was like, oh my god, I need to get that. So yeah, there's a few Labisia that I could talk about. But then the next one, this is a begonia, and I don't think I've ever spoken about having begonia on a wish list before, because this time last year I was not a begonia person, and so much has changed in the last year. But this one is one that just excites me so much, and it's the Begonia paulensis. And I know I'm talking about like what lots of plants look like kind of crossed, but the first time I saw this plant, I was like, it looks like a cross between a weird begonia and like the Pilia peperomioides. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of got that jolly, like just little round cheeky leaves, and I think it's a lot of fun, and I think it would be really, really cool to grow. I've never grown a begonia like this before either, and I know there are some really bizarre begonias out there. But I kind of like the fact that this one doesn't have the standard kind of angel wings form to it. I like that it's round, and the ruffles and the veination, I've seen people have said that it almost looks like spider's webs, and it really does. It really, really does. Like if you just look at the vein structure, the veination, and then the ruffliness that kind of encompasses that, it's incredible. I've said it before, but something I've always been really, really fascinated with long before I got into houseplants is how nature has this incredible way of mimicking itself. Like if you look at a leaf, it might look very similar to the palm of your hand, and there's loads of elements of nature that just kind of tie us all together. And yeah, this one, as I say, spider's webs, it looks so much like that, and it's just a really, really cool one. I know Wild Fern's got a huge one of these, and every time I see hers, I'm like, oh my god, I really, really want that. So yeah, that's one I would love to probably grow from a cutting, actually. Some of these other ones, I know I'm talking about growing them as big mature plants. I would say ideally I would like to start small with all of these plants. In fact, I don't really think I can afford to jump in with big plants at this stage. So yeah, I am gonna keep my eye out on Etsy and hopefully stumble across a cutting of this plant at some point soon. But yeah, it's just so kooky, so weird, and one that I absolutely adore. And then this next one is another one that I've had on my wish list for ages, absolutely ages, and it is the Alocasia sarian. And this one is, I believe, a hybrid Alocasia cross between the Zebrina and the Mitchellitziana. And obviously looking at it, you can very much tell the Mitchellitziana influence. It's got those lovely white veins, those lovely dark dramatic leaves, but then it's also got the, I want to say, like leatheriness of the Zebrina, which is really, really cool. And I actually don't have a picture of the stems up in front of me, but I believe it also has very Zebrina-like stems, which are very stripy and just very zebra-like and pretty. And despite the fact that this one is so incredibly popular, it's not one that you see about very often. It's not one that I see pop up online for sale. It's not one that I've ever seen at a garden centre or anything like that. So it is still quite hard to come by. And I've got a couple of friends that grow this plant, and everyone that I've known has struggled a little bit with it. And I don't know, again, if you grow this plant, please share some tips, things that have worked, things that haven't. But my friends that have grown this have all found that it's one that cycles a lot. And I think because naturally the size of the leaves that it gives you are quite big, like they seem to be much bigger than your standard Mitchellitziana just straight off the bat, and in order to sustain that growth I think it requires very high levels of light, and if you can't give it that, you're going to just end up with 1 or 2 leaves the whole time. I'm looking at pictures of it here, and again, I know this is like social media influence, but I'm looking at pictures of it and I'm like, that's not in a high light spot, and it's doing amazingly, but I guess maybe people have just like moved the plants to look better for pictures. So yeah, it's just one that I've had my eye on for so long. Again, I know it has the potential to get ginormous, and I would want to bring out the best in this plant, and I'd want to try and grow it as big and beautiful as I could. So again, maybe I need to wait for a little bit more space, but yeah, it's just stunning. It's just so stunning. Like the Mitchellitziana is still, it's one I know I didn't include it in my top 10 of the year plants video, but it is still a solid favourite in my collection. It's one that I can't imagine not growing. I think, in fact, oh, it's hard to say. I was going to say, I think I almost prefer my standard Mitchellitziana to my variegated Alocasia Frydek. I know they're different genuses, but they're very similar looking. I know I just said genus, I meant species. And also I know I included the variegated one in my top 10 and not my Mitchellitziana, so I don't know. It was a very close call. But yes, I really want this plant. I just really want this plant. I just think it's so cool. I think it's the coolest one. So yeah, I'm going to stop talking about that plant now and move on to the next one, which is one that I can't pronounce, but it is the Anthurium berriozabalense. I'm assuming that's how you pronounce it. But this one, very similarly to the Cercestis mirabilis that I showed you earlier in the video, it has got like what I can only describe as like ears. Do you know what I mean? The lobing is so defined on this plant, and like the lobes of the leaf are almost as big as the rest of the leaf. And I've said it when I've spoken about other loby plants before, but it's almost like, I don't know, like Mickey Mouse vibes. It just feels fun and it feels interesting, and I don't have any plants. I've got very loby plants in my collection, but I don't have any in my collection currently that have that form. Again, like I said about the Cercestis mirabilis, it's almost like, I know I said caladium about that one, but this is almost kind of like arrowhead syngonium shape, but obviously it is an anthurium and it's just got a lovely robustness to it, which I love. I do also find a lot of the time that plants that are a little bit more, I was going to say heavy duty, like ones that are a bit thicker in foliage, is that the word I'm going for? Robust, yeah. They are ones that I do just find are less susceptible to pests, less susceptible to disease, and typically more adaptable to the environment around them. That is probably a massive generalization, and there are some that aren't. But on the whole, that is something that I found. So again, it's one that I look at and I go, I think I could do it. I don't want to shoot myself in the foot by saying these things and then having an awful experience with them further down the line, but it feels achievable. I'm also just really happy with how my Anthurium collection is at the moment. I'm happy with how I've managed to build it up over the last year. I've got some beautiful species of Anthurium in my collection now, and I'm really trying to focus on, I guess now again, like I know I always bang on about it, but with limited space in a 1-bedroom flat, you do have to really think about the individuality of the plants and what you like really do have the room for. And something like this, I feel like there's nothing in my collection currently that is even remotely similar. And so it is one that I just feel would really tick a box for me and be a lovely one to add to my Anthurium collection. It's just gorgeous. And I love as well, and maybe the pictures that you're seeing aren't doing it justice, but I found a couple here that really display the silveriness of this plant, and it's got kind of almost like a bluey hue to its leaves, which I just adore. It's something that I really love in plants. It feels very magical. My Begonia Sinbad is one that's very much got that. I've got various silver Hoyas, and in fact Scindapsus Silver Hero, it's very much like that. I do have the Scindapsus Silver Hero. It's currently in massive propagation because things went very wrong with it. But yeah, I just love that silveriness, and so yes, basically this is a plant that I feel I must have, and one that I just think is so gorgeous. But then another one that I have spoken about before, I think this was on my wish list from last year and is one that I didn't manage to tick off, is the Schismatoglottis wallichii, and I have owned this plant in the past. I found it quite difficult, to be honest, when I had it before, and I think if I was to go back, I would do things very differently with this plant. I think, I don't know, I just wasn't ready to take on this plant at the time I got it. I think I was a little bit overwhelmed with the plants that I had, and I was in an even smaller space than I'm in now. I was living back at my mum's at this point, and yeah, the plant I think eventually met its fate by spider mites, I do believe. But I have had the Schismatoglottis Silver Borneo in my collection for over a year now. It's in my cabinet, and that's one that I have got on really well with. I've grown it in semi-hydro, and that has been a game changer for that plant. Honestly, I was finding it not difficult before I put it in semi-hydro, but I don't know, the second I put it in to semi-hydro, I just found everything got easier, and now it's one that I monitor really well. I pest check it frequently, but in the conditions I'm growing it in my cabinet, I'm typically able to deal with issues pretty quickly if they do occur. So what I'm saying is I think I am now in a much better place to potentially take on the wallichii again. Because oh my god, the foliage of this plant is like nothing I have seen in houseplants before, or in tropical plants, should I say. None of these are houseplants, we just bring them into our houses. But yeah, it's almost like it's been kind of brushed with a paintbrush. It's beautiful. And if I didn't know anything else about this plant and I was to just see it for the first time, I think potentially I might put it into the Caladium family. I don't know, it's got that very distinctive kind of lobiness at the top of the plant, which screams aroid and maybe might make me reconsider what I said about Calatheas, but I don't know, there's just something about the vibrancy of this plant that it almost feels like a colourful plant without it being colourful, if that makes sense. So yeah, like I just would love to give it another go. And I think, I've said it before, but I think sometimes having a plant and that plant not doing well and then having a little break from that plant makes you come back to things with a fresh pair of eyes. And I've done that with so many plants in my collection over the years. You never set out to kill a plant, but unfortunately it does happen from time to time. It happens to everyone from time to time. Even if they say that it doesn't, I can guarantee it does. So yeah, a second chance is what I would like. Oh, and then this is one that I have never shown you before, and I don't know a huge amount about this one's natural environment, but I think I'm right in saying this one would probably be classified as like a terrarium plant. I believe from what I know that it requires very high levels of humidity, but it is the Leea zippeliana SP Papua, something like that. And the first time I saw this plant, I saw it on Instagram, and I could not for the life of me find out what kind of plant it was. I saw someone had posted a picture of it, and I was looking at this plant and there was no description on the picture, and so I actually messaged the person and I was like, could you tell me what kind of plant this is, please? And they had got it as a no ID, so they had no clue what it was. And yeah, it was a while before I actually figured out what the plant was, and it's one that's gone very high up my wish list because I just think it's gorgeous. I think it's amazing, like the dark dramaticness of the leaves, but then those markings that it's got almost look like little sparkles. It's like it's got fairy lights on it. It's so pretty. And funnily enough, just looking at the pictures that I'm looking at of it here, structure-wise, it almost reminds me of a juvenile avocado tree. Do you know what I mean? Those leaves are almost, I don't know, they're almost avocado-esque. But obviously they're so dark and dramatic, and they've got as I say, that beautiful, beautiful marking on it. In some pictures I'm looking at here, it looks quite pink, so I'm guessing perhaps it's sun stresses. But yeah, even more so, this makes me think, assuming this is a terrarium plant, if it's not a terrarium plant, oh my God, I still want it, but that would be arguably easier because I could just grow it with the rest of my collection. But assuming it is a terrarium plant, or one that likes life in a terrarium, it just encourages me more than ever to, again, set up some beautiful terrarium spaces this year. We've got loads of like bell jar and bottle terrariums through in the bedroom, a lot of which Ross has made. But I think one of the things that I would really, really, really like to do at some point is either convert my cabinets that's next door in the bedroom into like a full freestanding terrarium, like almost like a sealed green wall. I know that would be effort, but I've done a lot of thinking and it's something I would really like to do. But as I say, and like I know I said this when I was talking about the Labisia turtleback, I would really like to be very precise and selective about the plants that I choose to put in there, and I would like to focus very much on the ones that cannot be grown in standard room conditions. So yeah, and like something like this, it just draws you in, doesn't it? It's just, there's something about it that just feels so magical. So yeah, it's a plant that I really feel quite strongly I must have at some point. It's one that just excites me because, again, I've got nothing like this in my collection. Nothing at all. Even the plants that are a little bit more weird and wacky, I feel like there's nothing... I was going to use the word unpredictable. There's nothing quite so unpredictable. There's nothing that's quite so... yeah, I guess like not uniform. I don't know. I don't know what the word exactly is that I'm looking for, but this one just feels like it's been picked up from another planet and brought back to Earth. That's how I feel about it. So yeah, it's gorgeous. And then a Hoya that I believe I've mentioned before, but it's overtaken some of the other silver splashy Hoyas on my list. The more I look at it, the more I fall in love. It is the Hoya coriacea silver. And the reason that this one has made it onto this list and not like the Nova Ghost or the Silver Dollar, for example, is because the size of this one's leaves. And don't get me wrong, I know the others have potential to size up as well, but this one seems to just... I don't know, it's kind of like the Latifolia or the Latifolia Sarawak. It seems to just naturally produce leaves that are much bigger than your average Hoya. And like the silver splashiness, as I've already said in this video, just draws me in, and it's just something that ticks all the boxes I really, really love. I love Hoya as a genus as well. I think bar one or two, it is so easy. I think if you're a beginner, it's a wonderful way to go. Obviously, it's pet friendly as a genus as well, which is a massive bonus. But there are just so many wonderful, weird Hoyas. And yeah, this is one that I feel I must have. So yeah, coriacea silver, it's very high up my wish list. It's one you don't see about very much. Again, I was looking on Etsy and I couldn't see any cuttings currently here in the UK for sale. You don't really see that much representation of Hoyas in garden centres here in the UK either. There's occasionally one or two. They're usually things like the wallichii and maybe like, I don't know, the crinklate and stuff like that, but you don't get that many Hoyas that are just like readily available to go out and buy for some reason. So yeah, I do feel like if I am going to find this plant, I probably need to be looking at like either specialist houseplant shops or Etsy, because that is so good for cuttings. I know a lot of you often ask where I get my plants and cuttings from, and a lot of the time it is Etsy and eBay. I've got certain sellers saved on there that I adore. And yeah, I'm always discovering new people to buy off there, so I'm going to be keeping my eyes peeled for that one. And then finally, this might even be my number one wishlist plant for the year. I'm going to try and pronounce it correctly. I pronounce it differently every time I say it. I'm going to go with confidence with Aristolochia leuconeura, and it looks like an Anthurium, but it's a vining plant. I don't know for sure, but I would not be surprised if this was somehow related to like Discoria, because it's almost like, I don't know, it's got the structure of something like a sweet potato vine, but those leaves are like the most perfect Anthurium-esque leaves, dark dramatic white veination, and it's got the lobiness. So for me, again, like all the boxes are ticked, and I just think it's wonderful. I think all of these plants are wonderful, and I obviously want all of them, but this is one that I'm just like, oh my goodness, you don't see this plant about very often, and I would love to train it to be able to climb, like, I don't know, round my ugly wire shelves or something like that, so you don't have to see them, you just see this beautiful foliage, because it's so striking, and it just stops you in your tracks. Like, I think this is the reason that I love velvet leaf anthuriums so much, and in fact, even things like the Alocasia mitchellitziana that I spoke about earlier, and the sarian, like, I don't know, just like the beautiful dynamic within the leaves. And this one, yeah, this one just floored me when I first saw it. When I was making or researching, sorry, for one of my weirdest plants videos, there was one that I came across which I believe was actually an orchid, and it was indigenous to the Philippines, I believe, and it had these beautiful flowers that came out of the top of the leaf, and the leaves looked very much like miniature Anthurium clarinervium leaves. And this is almost the same thing. Like, obviously that other plant, it's very protected, and I'm never going to grow that in a home environment, and I'm fine with that. But this one, I'm like, it's achievable. It's actually achievable, and yeah, I love it. I love it so much. So yes, those are my current 10 tip-top wish list plants for 2025. As always, of course, there's more. There are so many more I could have spoken about, but these are the ones that I think I could actually get. Like, I think it's achievable. But as I say, I would be so interested to know what some of your wish list plants are, so please let me know what they are down in the comments. And yeah, this is so exciting. I haven't bought any plants yet this year. I know we're only midway through January, so that's probably a good thing. But obviously the beginning of the year, colder months, it's just not the best time to buy plants, but it's nice to think about what I might buy when the time is right. So yes, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, have a lovely day, and I will see you in the next video.
Stay sexy, plant lovers.